What's up, guys? Welcome back to review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 287. We have got quite a big boy to unpack today, honestly. This episode has a lot of things to talk about and a lot of things I want to discuss about it. So, with that being said, let's just go ahead and jump right into this discussion here. So, first things first, off the bat, the episode starts out with Layla talking to Neil at the start, and it seems that he is in on the plan a bit, but not too much. I don't think he really knows exactly the whole details of what they're trying to accomplish. But we get a quick flashback, and we're meeting Neil for the first time. He's definitely not Sarah and Layla's father based on overall appearance of what we see, but he does look a little bit similar to Vaughn. He does also have a goatee, and his hair is purple like we've all been speculating for a while. So, we get a glimpse of how Layla was also recruited by him into Spectre. She mentioned before that she was closer to him and worked directly under him. Now, the flashback within the flashback is kind of similar to how Oren recruited Terrence in a moment of vulnerability. Neil is first seen protecting a seemingly slightly injured Layla from the rain, holding an umbrella over her as she looks up at him. And she even says that he taught her that regardless of power, everyone deserves the same level of respect. So, yeah, I am going to go ahead and say Neil can seemingly be trusted, so far on what we've seen. So, she then comments that Oren has been abusing Spectre too much and he needs to be stopped. Neil even brings this up, asking, hey, how's the plan going to weaken Oren in their initial conversation? So she then asks him if he can support John and Sarah in what they're doing. She even brings up that they're going to try and steal equipment from Oren's facility. And Neil is just like, that's kind of what? Anyway, so after a bit, he says he will see what he can do. And then we cut back to Miranda, where episode 286 left off, with Miranda greeting Sarah and John. And Sarah then introduces John, saying that she doesn't really believe, they're trying to steal from Spectre right now. They're trying to take Spectre down. But she says she believes that he's a perfect candidate for Spectre. But Oren quickly retorts that she can't decide that on her own. But Sarah then fights back, saying that it was Oren's idea to begin with, calling back at Rowden Hill and his plan to recruit all of Wellston's high tiers. And then Oren clearly shows a lot of doubt about John, but Neil steps in and tells them that Layla met John after the attempted assassination on him and Sarah's life and defends him, even saying that he thinks he could be a good fit. But Miranda then suggests to let John plead his own case. John absolutely nails and crushes his introduction, and he just starts out by saying, I hate all of you. He doesn't actually say that, but he does just say, first things first, I don't like any of you at all. But he then says that as much as he may hate what they've done to him and Sarah, he does still believe in their overall vision. And I want to stress this enough. It's something I've said before, but I'm going to bring it up again because it's relevant. Early series John wasn't lying or faking wanting a better society. That was never an act. He wanted people to be better. He wanted society to be better. He just didn't believe in himself that he could be the one to bring about change, because we saw how everything went when John did use his ability in the past. But yeah, I think this just adds further proof that, pre-series John wasn't a fake, or early series John wasn't totally a fake or a farce. Anyway, Miranda then does bring up as to why asks why he's against the structure that should benefit him as a high tier, and that he should be siding with the authorities. But John tells him that he will never trust them, briefly commenting on himself having a bad history with them, and then Oryx asks him to explain. John then grows really nervous and tells him about him being a late bloomer and how his power corrupted him, but he finds himself unable to continue when he remembers his time with Keon and all he did to him. Sarah then steps in for John and finishes telling them that he was mistreated by the authorities. Miranda acknowledges it as him experiencing the hardships of the weak and the strong, in which John just nods in agreement. Oren just keeps being a bitch ass and then mentions that it doesn't prove his loyalty. And honestly, like, Orin has a point. Like, they're not planning to help Spectre. They're planning to steal from them right now and take Orin out. But John retaliates angrily, and this is something that I didn't notice at first, but Wheel of Fate actually brought up. John retaliates and laughs at them, and Sarah kind of actually chuckles. She just kind of like covers her mouth, and like you can see a slight smile. But John says that he can be sent on an assignment so that Spectre can attack his classmates again, even pointing out and telling them that if they didn't backstab their own people, they wouldn't have to worry about loyalty. So yeah, my boy spitting facts. Neil then steps in again, saying that it wasn't their intention to hurt him or anyone else, and he offers an amends in restoring their abilities, claiming that he wants to build trust in Spectre and thinks that Spectre would benefit from having John around. Now, I believe with this, I believe he is trying to buy them time to make sure that they can get their abilities back, because again, remember, he is aware of the plan, so he knows, like, okay, they're going to try some shit, I do need to back them up, I need to make sure that they can get their abilities back so they can pull them off. Miranda then says that she's going to consider his recruitment, but agrees to return their ability. Then she tells Orin to do so and to make sure that they get home safely. Now, I think based on this, Miranda kind of seems to be the one who's truly in charge of Spectre, or probably has the highest amount of actual authority within the organization. I know that there was, it was brought up that Orin has the most power currently and influence, but just based on how she kind of seems to be the one leading these meetings and, speaking first and everything, I think it's safe to say that, and also Orin doesn't really fight back, he does agree. So yeah, I am thinking that Miranda probably is the one kind of mostly in charge, leading everything. So we then see Orin at undisclosed location because, that's Uru's favorite place. She always loves putting people there. But she tells him, and he tells himself that he will restore their abilities on his conditions. He then reaches over to a phone and orders the recovery of their abilities, but he says to operate the device at half power. Now, initially, I did read this as, okay, he's only going to restore half their ability back. But the wording kind of makes me wonder, is it only going to restore them to half power? Or does that just mean it's going to take a longer treatment to regain their strength back? Or to regain their power back? Is he trying to keep an eye on them for longer? So, after that, he then video calls Agent 23 and the female agent, and he orders them to keep an eye on John and Sarah at the recovery room, as they may be able to run their test. Now, I think we're definitely going to be seeing some, different abilities used. We're definitely going to see a fight of some kind. So, John and Sarah are then still in the meeting room with John a little on edge. And when Sarah asks if he's okay, he just says, "This place makes me feel on edge. I want to get out, get our abilities, and get out." So, I think that'll come into play later. We'll touch on that at the end. So, then Blake's dad shows up. Okay, not really Blake's dad, but the motherfucker looks like Blake. Same hair color and same haircut, too. He just kind of looks like a, kind of geeky looking scientist guy. He looks like Blake. Like, it's crazy. So, yeah, there's that. So, after that, as they're heading to the recovery room, we cut to Caden slipping on a lab coat, posing as a scientist whom it seems he just knocked out and left in a closet. We then see him using Layla's card that she gave him to get through the labs, saying that he needs to get to a elevator at the back of the facility that will take them to the lab. So as he's walking through, he then finds his way around and spots them heading into that very same elevator that'll take them into the lab. As he tries to access it with Layla's card, it fails, and he says, like, dang it, okay. So he has to think of something. Somehow he gets into the elevator, though. I'm not really too sure how, but it opens up. He gets to the top. So he gets in the elevator. It begins heading down. And once he sees it get to the fourth bottom floor, he looks up at the roof and sees, kind of like a little vent that he can open up. He opens it up and gets on top of the elevator, and then we see him teleport to one of the entrances. So that's where we cut off with Kaden. We then see Agent 23 and the other agent walking around in the halls. Just very briefly, we just see that they're clearly, patrolling and heading over. We then end off with John and Sarah beginning the treatment, which should take about an hour, as the doctor tells them to relax and close their eyes, and the chapter ends. Now, a few things I want to point on and just touch on real quick before we end off fully. Now, John is probably going to... Now, let's assume that John does only... that they are only restoring half of their actual power level. So, let's say that. Based on the information we've seen with John, regaining a fairly decent chunk of his ability back, if he was able to send Zeke that far back and do that much damage to him. He does that. I think even with half of his abilities stored, he probably will, in a moment of panic, regain his full strength back and, kind of restore his ability on his own. Maybe not, because Uru did drop that thing with John, that Doc's looking into John's ability and, what's going on there. So, yeah, but I think it's possible that, once he gets his ability back, he'll manipulate his aura channels like before and in, a moment of panic or, pushing himself, reactivating his ability to his full strength. So, another thing, Kuyo probably could still show up when things go south. Blyke and Ison kind of left off hey, should we tell Kuyo? And, like I mentioned before, Kuyo's going to put the strings together with Kaden, and he's going to put together the strings with Kaden, and I think things go south. Kuyo gets that information. He calls Kaden, hey, what's going on? I know what's happening. Please let me help you. And, Kaden is probably going to give Kuyo the location so he can show up and help when things go south. Because Kaden has to know where he's going in order to use his ability. Now, I think that does apply to physical addresses as well. So I think it does make sense that Kaden would be the one to know where exactly they are fully. He probably, and I think it would make perfect sense for him to not tell Serafina for, his own safety and everything. But yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility that Kuyo could, they're still probably somewhere fairly close. They're probably still in Wellston, honestly. And Kuyo's just I'm on my way, bro. And, he shows up and, he helps defend John and Sarah. So, there's that as well. Now, in reference to now still talking about Kaden is definitely going to get caught by Agent 23 and vice versa, because they've both seen each other before. They've both seen each other's faces. So that's definitely going to cause some hiccups. Now, is Kaden going to notice Agent 23 first and be like, oh, fuck, this just got a lot more complicated? Or is Agent 23 going to see Kuyo or Kaden and be like, hey, you're not a lab assistant. You're not supposed to be in here. Who knows? Now, last thing I want to point on. I mentioned John being on edge in this episode. Now, originally, in the reaction, Tube Noob and Miriam both mentioned that John was already on edge during the visit, and he's probably going to have a nightmare during the treatment. Uru did also drop that little piece earlier, a few episodes ago, with John mentioning having nightmares to Sarah back when she moved in. Now, is he going to yank on his wire and ruin his treatment, or, might he hit someone in his sleep? Who knows? But Miriam actually pointed something out that I want to talk about. So, this is what Miriam brought up in last week's episode. So, I did some research on new speculation. Technically, when someone is under anesthesia, the person is unconscious, losing feeling, and their body is paralyzed. In short, the person is unaware. And Miriam is she looks into medical science. She pointed that out as well. Dreams, in this case nightmare, technically do not occur during anesthesia, but they can happen after or coming off anesthesia. What could happen is that John could start having hallucinations and be in a state of panic once he starts coming off the anesthetic, knife to the chest. The cause can be because of stress. I said in the live chat that John was already a bit wound up before the procedure. And let's be real, he has a tendency to freak out. So that's a very interesting point. That's very interesting that Miriam brought them up. And, I'm glad she did. Because, yeah, John could be good for the majority of it, but once the anesthetic starts coming off, he could have, something bad could really happen. He could have a really bad nightmare at that point. And yeah, John is under a lot of stress, so that would totally make sense for him. Now, this is something that Miriam brought up as well, but she said this was probably very unlikely to happen, but let's give her credit where it's due in case it does happen. Another bad reaction that could happen because of anesthesia awareness. Another bad reaction could happen because of anesthesia awareness. This means that the person's body is paralyzed, but they are still aware of their surroundings. This will be unlikely for John because that condition is extremely rare, so definitely not. So, yeah, that's some really good points that Miriam brought up as well. So thank you very much for bringing those up, Miriam. That was good to know. So, overall, yeah, like I said, this episode has a whole lot to unpack, and, yeah, I'm very excited to see what's going to happen today. So, with all that being said, though, overall, I would give this episode, honestly, a 8.7 out of 10. It's really good for, more discussion, but it sets up a lot, and we got to meet Neil, which was really cool. I was excited to see that. And yeah, it sets up episode 288 beautifully, in my opinion. So, with all that being said, guys, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments, and let me know what you're most excited to see about episode 288. And yeah, see you guys back here tonight. And as always, everyone, see you, Space Cowboy.